Okay, I hope you have made progress with paragraph one and your introduction. Um, this is, as we've said, preparation for your end of year assessment, and therefore it has to be excellent, not just passing off as a basic attempt. So some of you need to put more effort into refining the arguments with reasons, evidence, counter arguments, replies, um, in putting forward your case for or against the existence of God. Now, one big thinker we've not considered is Friedrich Nietzsche, and you'll find in chapter 29 a whole chapter on Nietzsche in the Little History of Philosophy. I'll put up the audio file for that under files if you want to listen to it. But I want to just give you some exercises to do on Nietzsche and to briefly explain his views here. A very famous passage from 1882 is the parable of the madman by Nietzsche. I'm just going to read it to you here because it gives a sense of what Nietzsche thinks is happening in European society as it starts to sort of move God aside. Traditionally, God has held a very powerful place in the institutions of society. In established religion, where the state and religion were very much joined at the hip in Germany and England and so on. But with the rise of science and technology and skepticism, people have sort of moved God to the side. And they're worried that if you get rid of God altogether, then everything becomes permissible. There are no kind of objective values anymore. And Nietzsche gives voice to this fear in his parable of the madman. Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran into the marketplace and cried incessantly, "I seek God, I seek God." And many of those who did not believe in God were standing around just then. He provoked much laughter. Has he got lost? One asked. Did he lose his way like a child? Another asked. Or is he hiding? Is he afraid of us? Has he gone on a voyage, emigrated? Thus they yelled and laughed. The madman jumped into their midst and pierced them with his eyes. "Whither is God?" he cried. "I will tell you. We have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. But how did we do this? How could we drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving? Away from all suns? Are we not plunging continually, backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there still any up or down? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is it not night continually closing in on us? Do we not need to light lanterns in the morning? Do we not hear nothing as yet of the noise of the grave diggers who are burying God? Do we smell nothing as yet of the divine decomposition? God's too decompose. God is dead. God remained dead, and we have killed him. Now, the listeners don't really get the madman. They think he's kind of lost the plot. But what he's saying is very simple, really. In asking, is there still any up and down? He's saying, if you get rid of God, how do you know what's up and what's down anymore? You've lost your orientation when it comes to morality. You don't know what right from wrong is. There's no objective kind of grounding or foundation to morality anymore. And Nietzsche calls this the transvaluation of all values. Everything's thrown up in the air and we see what lands. So these skeptics at the beginning, Nietzsche is saying, you've killed God off, but you've not yet realized that there are going to be big repercussions from this. So what are some of the big ideas of Nietzsche? Well, he was born in 1844 and died in 1900. He became a professor at 24. And one of his big ideas is that God is dead. And as we've said, we've heard of this madman who goes around proclaiming it. He leaves the town square saying, "I see I have come too soon." In other words, there will come a time when Europe will recognize what Nietzsche is saying, that secularization and pushing God aside will come. But he's just come a bit too early. Nietzsche is writing there So 1859 is when Darwin publishes The Origin of the Species, and skepticism begins to arise at the biblical account of Genesis. So it's only just beginning to take root, this kind of skepticism. What else can we say about Nietzsche? Well, there's a helpful video there if you want to follow it, but why might God is dead create a void for human beings? Well, if you get rid of God, what do you replace him with? Where do you get your values from? Are they subjectively made up by human beings? Do we decide that right is a certain course of action and wrong is another course of action? Where do we get our values from? Is it a good or a bad thing that God is dead? What are the consequences? Nietzsche thinks it's a very serious thing and it will cause us to have to rethink everything. But one of the things that he dislikes a great deal about religion is he thinks it kind of creates a slave morality, what he calls Sklavenmoral, because he's writing in German. And what he means by that is in the era of the Greeks and the Romans, all of the things that were virtuous were things like pride and strength and power and honor and justice. These very powerful, strong virtues. But what he argues is that the slaves in that society couldn't take on their bosses, their kind of slave owners, in a straight fight. So what they did instead was they tried to turn morality on its head. So they tried to say, what is virtuous is now vicious, and what is vicious now, regarded as bad, is going to be good. I'll give you some examples. So for this slave morality, humility became a virtue, compassion became a virtue, selfless service of others became a virtue. These were despised in Roman society. As we've said, it was all pride and strength and power and honor. And now they get turned into vices, and the things that were despised in Greek or Roman culture become the virtuous things to aspire to. So Nietzsche thinks this is a very bad idea to have slave morality kind of driving things. And he thinks that Christianity and Judaism have kind of pushed this slave morality, and its effect has been to stop cutting edge kind of supermen, or Übermensch as he calls them, from moving things forward. So he thinks that people like Napoleon, great generals, great people who make great advances in history, always kind of break a few legs to make an omelette. They always kind of will do things that will offend people, that will cause controversy, that will sometimes lead to death. But through that, they will push forward our understanding and our ideas. So what you need to do, and I'll give you one or two video links, is to summarize what he means by these ideas. God is dead is briefly to say, in European society, for hundreds of years throughout the medieval world, God was everywhere, in priests, in cathedrals, in churches, in every town and village, in the rituals from birth, baptism to marriage to funerals, in festivals and sacred time. God was everywhere. But as you come into the 19th century, people are starting to get very skeptical. There's the rise of science, and people are distrustful about miracles. There's Darwin's The Origin of the Species. People are starting to be distrustful of the Bible and its authority. And bit by bit, the institutional power of religion is on the fall, the wane. So God is dead is this statement. Let's put it up front and say, what would society look like if God was out of the picture? If we were just making the morality up ourselves subjectively, what would it look like? Now, nihilism is the belief, literally it means nothing. So it's the belief that there are no values, no right and no wrong. Nietzsche doesn't go with that, but he is saying when you get rid of God, you're going to have to recreate all values and make them up subjectively yourself. Otherwise, you will be left with nihilism. So there is a real risk that when you get rid of God, you're left with nothing in terms of moral values. There are no objective measures of right and wrong anymore. That's what some might argue. Übermensch, and I'll put a video up about this from the School of Life, is about the Superman idea that if you can kill God off, then humans can, in a sense, become gods themselves. They can fulfill their full potential. They're unchained in Nietzsche's idea. They can break out of the straitjacket of religion. They can create new values, push forward with new breakthroughs in science and technology and politics, and they can change the world. So it's a very bold idea of Übermensch, Supermen. Slaven morality is this idea that the slaves who are at the bottom want to turn morality on its head. They want to take Roman pride and justice and honor and power and make them into vices, and they want to take compassion, humility, service of the poor and the weak and make them into virtues. So it's that turning around of morality that Nietzsche despises, because he thinks that is what makes strong society into weak society. The transvaluation of values is, once God is dead, everything is permissible. There is no objective moral standard of right and wrong, and therefore humans have to create that. They have to subjectively invent that. You might see that as a good or a bad thing. So your task this lesson is to define those features of Nietzsche's thought, and there are one or two videos that will help you to do so, as well as this one.